Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing very, very well. Azren, the language nerd here, as per usual. And today we have a guest who is...
Hey there, my name's Diego.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to have Diego here. Let's just dive right in. So first of all, you're from Colombia, correct?
Yes, I'm from Colombia, specifically from Medellin.
So here's my favorite thing about Colombia, or one of the things that blows my mind about the country. It is crazy to me how you can go from one region to literally the neighboring region, and the accent is completely different. It's
Definitely
crazy. Like,
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, you're gonna hear like a bunch of accents here. Like you just go to the coast, it's gonna be completely different. And in fact, in like different parts of the coast, there's gonna be even more differences. Yeah, it's very interesting.
I watched a video, and I don't know if this is true. I don't know if you know if this is true or not, but I watched a video maybe what, 6 months ago, and the guy in the video was saying that Colombia has the most number of different regional accents in one specific country. I don't know if that's true. I'm not sure, but that's what he was saying.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know how true that is, but you can find a lot of accents here in Colombia.
Yeah. So what?
Like the capital is completely different to Medellin, right? Or like to the south of the country, it's completely different to Medellin and the coast. You can find lots of accents. You can even find like lots of languages here. There's a lot of indigenous people here. So
oh yeah,
yeah. Like it's like a couple of months ago, I went to the Amazon, and there were like different tribes of indigenous, and each one of them had their own language. Very interesting.
What indigenous languages are there in Colombia?
Well, I only know about one, which is the one I visited, which was Ticuna. There are way more, but I don't remember them right now.
Is it like, do you know? And if you don't know, it's fine. It's fine. I'm just interested by the indigenous languages of many South American countries. Do you know what the roots of the language are? Like, is it Aztec? Is it Mayan? I know so little about Colombian history. That
I think the correct English expression right now would be "your guess is as good as mine," right? All I know is that we have like way too many indigenous people here. We got Wayunaiki, we got Chibchas. Man, I don't even know.
So many.
There's so many of them.
Huh. Interesting. And so, your English is very good, by the way.
Thank you.
How did you learn?
Oh man, that's a long story. It all started when I was a little kid because my parents wanted me to learn English, and then they made me take some English lessons when I was very young. But at the end of high school, I couldn't really speak English. I couldn't really hold a conversation with anyone. So like at the end of high school, I was just like taking English just for pass the test and get the graduation, diploma. I don't know if that's an English word.
Yeah.
Is that an English word? Oh, okay. All right. Well, after that, I got to meet my cousins from the United States, and they were raised by my uncle, obviously, who is a Spanish native speaker, and they live in the United States. So it was pretty impressive to me to see that these little girls could speak English and Spanish so proficiently and so easily. Like they could speak literally English and Spanish using accents, like if they were from Colombia and at the same time as if they were from the United States. So that was like the spike that I needed for getting motivated and start like learning to speak English.
Right.
So when I met them, I remember I spent like a week or two with them, and like that was the time in which I learned most English in my life. And then after that, I decided I wanted to do it. I wanted to learn English, and I wanted to create my own method.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I never really did it, but I started to do like fun things because I remember that like the most important thing that I experienced with my cousins is that we were having fun. We were all the time making jokes. They were always laughing at me for some reasons, you know. So I remember.
And with your cousins, you spoke in English or you spoke in Spanish?
Well, they speak both languages.
But when you were, because you said they were making fun of you, they were
Yeah.
laughing. Like that was in English, or that was in Spanish, or that was both?
When I heard them speaking English, I was like, man, I want to just speak English with them. So I was speaking English with them all the time. I was doing the best I could because at the time I really didn't have proficiency or fluency, but I just wanted to make them speak to me, you know, so I could like pick everything they said. I even remember specific phrases that I learned during those 2 weeks, which is very interesting for me. You know. Yeah, and then I started doing like independent things. I started to watch TV shows, series, cartoons, movies, and then yeah, it was nice, but I really wasn't like becoming fluent, right?
Right.
And it was kind of difficult to understand that. But then I started Googling and I found a mentor on the internet. That's how I call him. It's a mentor. It's actually just it's an English teacher, which that's like the one that I learned everything I know from teaching.
Really? That's fascinating. Who's this mentor? Let's give them some love.
Yeah, he's AJ Hope from Effortless English.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Have you heard about him?
Yep, I do. I have heard of him. So he taught you. He was your English teacher?
Yeah, he was. Well, I bought his courses, right?
Okay.
So I took like one of his courses completely, and then I made another one just half of it. But when I finished the first course, I started to interact with some native speakers from my area, and we became friends, right? So yeah, that's basically how I did it. Like my ultimate test was when I went to the United States in 2014, and it was like a proof to me that I had learned English because I didn't really have any communication problems there. So that was like, yeah, I got it.
Matt, so I don't think I've ever spoken with someone, I don't think, who's been able to be like, oh, this particular program was like the unlock for me. And like, tell us about like, what were some of the things in the program that helped you? Like, why was it good? How did it help you so much?
Well, it was not just the program, right? But it really had like a big impact on my English.
Well, how is it structured? Let's start. Like, how is the program structured? Like, what do they do in it?
Yeah, it's all about stories, you know, and it's all listening. So in the program, you'll never find any grammar things. You know, you'll never find grammar lessons. It's all about stories, you know, and he uses some specific techniques to make sure you get the future tense, the past tense, the present tense. So it's very interesting. In fact, I actually bought his book in which he explains his method. He uses a method called TPRS, which is teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how I got it. That's how I got to learn.
Interesting. So basically, he's just telling, if I've got this right, basically based on my knowledge of TPRS, basically what he would do is they have lots of different stories, but the stories are written or told in a way where it's designed for you to acquire a specific element of the language. So for example, let's say, using your example, let's say future tense is what they want you to acquire. It's going to be a story that is heavily driven to help you understand the future tense because of everything else that's happening in the story. You're almost picking it up and understanding and learning it with context. Is that more or less accurate?
Well, most important thing was that the story was easy to understand.
Got it.
You know, like AJ bases his approach on the studies of Stephen Krashen, who talks a lot about comprehensible input, right?
Yes.
Basically, he says, what he says is that if you understand the language, then you're acquiring it, right? Well, that's basically what I understand from that, right? Like you need to get messages, because if you hear noise, then that's all you get, right? You're not learning anything, you're not understanding anything. It's just noise. So during the English course, it was all about easy to understand stories, you know, with easy vocabulary. But then he started to introduce like more complex vocabulary, and the more you progress through the course, the more complex the story gets. So you start learning some idioms, you start learning some phrasal verbs that English speakers use very commonly. So it was all based on listening. It was like stories, and then he gave us like extra material using the same vocabulary just to listen to the same words. So yeah, like the method is all about listening to comprehensible things and lots of repetition. And that's what I use for teaching my students Spanish.
Got it. Interesting. Yeah. So you, is that your full-time job, teaching Spanish?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I started teaching English back in 2014, I think. Yeah, 2014. And then I moved I moved to the internet, right? And I was looking to teach English online, but since like on the internet, people is more interested on connecting with native speakers. So that's how I thought, you know, maybe I should do this with Spanish. And I started doing it. And yeah, I like right now I do some lessons on Verbling, and I also have some courses on Udemy for learning Spanish.
Yep. Interesting. So you also use storytelling. Where do you find your stories from? Or do you make your own?
Yeah, I make my own stories. I really like that. I really like making stories. It's just like I don't really take like lots of time to create like long text or like a book or something. I just make like a short story, which is fun. I try to always like put that funny side of the story, so students can like not just learn words or a story, a simple story, but like make them feel something. You know, like trying to connect their emotions to Spanish. So if it's funny because they heard them in Spanish and they understood that, right? That's, yeah, I made them. Basically, I make my stories.
Interesting. Do you post them anywhere?
No, I never do. Wait, I actually posted like a couple of them on my YouTube channel. Yeah, I recorded them. Like, there's like 4 or 5 stories, I think 3, on my YouTube channel. But most of the times I just use them during my lessons and on my courses.
Got it. Interesting. I think a lot of, if that's something you ever want to do, I think a lot of people would find them useful, your stories. I know in the past, because for example, I know that there's people who will use TPRS as like an activity Versus you've actually structured your whole teaching style based on TPRS and telling stories and teaching that way. I know some people literally will just use it as an activity. Yeah, I honestly think like people would use I would imagine people would use your stories, because I don't know. I mean, let's just say there's not necessarily a go-to bank for, oh, here's where you find 1,000 TPRS stories for Spanish. Here's what you should do first. Here's like a level 1. Here's a bunch of easy ones. Here's some intermediate ones. Here's some advanced ones. This one's teaching for imperfecto and pretérito. This one's teaching these types of words. This one's teaching, I don't know, something for you to consider in the future if it interests you.
Yeah, it's a great idea. And there's actually some people doing that right now. Like, I do it. I'm one of those people who's doing it, but I've been following some people who's actually been more interested in stories. It's like, I think I'd say it's something like it's been coming up lately.
Who are you following that posts that is actually posting about their TPRS stories?
Well, I wouldn't say it's TPRS exactly, but Ollie Richards from I Will Teach You a Language, he's been using stories like way too much lately, and I love that. Like, I'm a huge fan of him and his work. And he uses stories. There's also another guy whose name is Oscar Pelus, who is very, very nice with that.
Oscar who?
Oscar Pelus. His website is unlimitedspanish.com.
Okay.
He's very nice too with stories. Well, it's not like I have taken courses from him, but I've heard his podcast. And at the end of every episode, he always tells some stories using this TPRS style.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Have you paid for other courses aside from AJ's courses?
To learn English?
English, yeah, sure. Or any language, if you speak any. I'm not sure if you do, but
no, never did. Like, my parents did when I was a little kid, you know.
But not as an adult, not of your own choice, not of.
No.
Have you paid for, as an adult, have you paid for either a language class, or I guess what I'm trying to go is, have you paid for any other English resources when you're learning aside from that one program?
For English, no, never done it.
For other languages?
For Portuguese, I've been using, in fact, that's another tool that uses stories too. Man, I forgot the name. It's by this guy. Man, I forgot it. Oh, LinQ. Yeah, by Steve Kaufman.
Yep.
It's all about stories. It's an app. Yeah, I've been using that to learn Portuguese. It's pretty good, but man, I think my light just went down.
That's all right. You said something so powerful, like you said the magic LinQ word, and the world exploded. It's like, it's so good that your light bulb exploded.
Okay. All right.
Interesting. I asked you. Sorry, go ahead. I'll let you finish. Go ahead.
Yeah, LinQ. It's all about stories by Steve Kaufman. It's pretty good. So I was.
And are you using the free version of LinQ, or are you using the paid version?
I use the free version. Like yeah, I have to be honest. Like 6 months in a row, but I paid for 1 month, and then I stopped it because I really was not being disciplined with it, which is like a very important part of TPRS, or like any style of learning languages, any approach, or however you want to call that.
Got it. Okay. No, the reason I asked you is actually it's partially selfish and partially for everybody else watching this. One thing I've thought about is the cost effectiveness of how do I explain this? Man, this is difficult, and hopefully we can hash this out. So I've always wondered about the cost effectiveness of different options to learn a language. For example, there's some apps that you pay a monthly subscription, and that you get whatever content and whatever service that they offer. There's classes where you pay a certain amount and you're in a classroom and you take your class. There's tutors and there's italki, there's verbling like you do. There's, you know, AJ's there's lots of language learning programs, or there's video courses. There's so many different things. And one of the things I've always thought about is like, what's the most cost efficient or the most cost effective way to go about it? I actually don't even know the answer. I don't even know if there is an answer, but I thought it'd be interesting to bring it up. Do you have any thoughts based on your experience at all?
Well, I'd say if you find one that you think is like the right for you, just go for it. I say this because that happened with me when I found AJ's program, right? And yeah, like I've been looking for a program on TPRS with for Portuguese, right? It's back on.
There you go, Matt. Okay. Something's going on there at your house.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, I've been looking for a program using TPRS for Portuguese, but I haven't been able to find it. But yeah, if I had the chance to find it, I would probably pay for it, you know, because like yeah, this is probably very very challenging. Maybe it's gonna have, or it's gonna cause a lot of discussion among polyglots and teachers and people. But like, I trust TPRS. Like, I don't know if this is an English expression, but I would say blindly.
Yep.
With my eyes closed.
Yeah, blindly is fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would pay for that for Portuguese if I would find it, if I could find it.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm a big fan of TPRS, and it's so let's go in this direction actually. Now that since we're on the TPRS train at the moment, so do you think TPRS, or learning through any language through TPRS and through stories and whatnot, do you think it is a strategy that would work for the masses, as in, let's say, more than 80% of people, in your perspective?
In my perspective, I think it would, as long as you follow every direction on how to use it. Because I've taught lots of people using this method. And, you know, like at the beginning of the course, I always say, you know, these are the rules. Here's how you should do it. Here's how you should go. But then they started doing the old things, you know, like they turned to a grammar book, and that's things that are not supposed to do when you are using the TPRS method. And that's when they start to slow down the process. They start to think about grammar. They don't have the discipline, you know, to do it regularly, which is a very essential part when you're.
Well, let me throw something at you here. Let me throw something at you. So, in your perspective, do you think it's necessarily a bad thing if someone was trying to think of the grammar rules and go in that direction?
What do you mean a bad thing?
Well, I guess what I'm wondering is, like, so I'm thinking of myself, right? I think of myself when I learn another language, French, Spanish, Mandarin, Gujarati, whatever, right? When I'm learning another language, and I learn something that's grammatically unfamiliar or new, I 100% for a certain period of time find myself going, how does that grammar rule work? Right, okay, in my head, working through it. And then at some point that stops happening because I have interacted with people. I've used something where I've seen it used in a more natural way, and I memorize that phrase, and all of a sudden that one phrase becomes natural, and then another phrase becomes natural, and then my brain starts to make connections, and all of a sudden that whole grammar point becomes natural. But there definitely initially there's a phase where I am thinking of the grammar rules. Now, granted, a big thing to point out is I take a long time. It takes me years before I'm comfortable speaking a language, like at a decently high level. So maybe I'm actually asking this not as a leading question, but maybe I'm actually not doing it the best way, which is why I'm asking you, like, do you think it's not necessarily a great idea to be thinking about those grammar rules when you're trying to communicate?
Well, you never do it when you communicate, right? You never think about grammar.
I guess so, but I guess for me, I find, and again, I could be doing this so not wrong, but I could be doing this in a less effective way than I should be, which is definitely an option and definitely possible. Like, I know initially that's almost like a step for me to work towards not having to think about grammar, personally. Like, if let's break this down. Let's rewind. I don't know if you caught yourself. You said a sentence a minute ago where you said would instead of could, and you corrected yourself after, right? Mm-hmm. Were you thinking of the grammar rule then? It seemed like you caught yourself like, oh yeah, not would, could.
Well, I didn't really think about the grammar rule, but I just corrected myself.
Right.
Right. It was not like I was, would be like, you know, like possibility.
Sure.
I was not thinking about that.
Yeah.
I just thought, you know, that didn't sound quite right. So like my brain just threw it at me. I don't know if that's correct.
No, totally. Like, yeah, absolutely.
My brain was like, you know, it's could. Don't say would. It's not correct. Say it this way. You know. I always tell my students to think about them as if they were little babies, right? We're just learning how to speak, right? And as we all know, babies do a lot of mistakes when they are just learning to speak, right? They never think about pronunciation, they just talk, right? It's all automatic. So, yeah, I always tell my students, notice what babies do. First of all, they listen, and then over time, they start speaking. And then finally, they go to school and they learn how to use, you know, a pencil. They start writing, they start reading. And then maybe on third, fourth grade, they start seeing grammar rules, right? Maybe I'm wrong, right?
That could be.
But like, that's the natural order. When you go to school, you already know how to speak. So why should you try to force yourself when you're learning a foreign language with trying to memorize the grammar rules, learn how to use them, instead of just listening and letting come the language naturally to your brain, right?
Do you think I would, based on, I guess, in your perspective, do you think I would learn, I'm getting selfish now, do you think I would learn faster if I were to transition my approach to something closer to what we've been talking about for the past 20-ish minutes?
Yes, I do.
You think so?
I do. Yeah. And I blindly trust TPRS. It's like, man, like, for example, most of my students, the ones who really spend time listening to the stories, and obviously not just the TPRS method, but listening to other things, like listening to TV shows, cartoons, TV shows, movies. I think I already said TV shows. They are the ones who make the most progress, right? They are the best students. Like I would say that you can learn 3 times faster than if you do it with a grammar book, you know, the traditional methods of grammar drills, stuff like that.
It's interesting. No, it's a good conversation. I know for me, when I look at how I generally tend to learn, usually when a grammar rule is introduced to me, I want to understand the rule of how it works. Once I have an understanding of, oh, this is how blah, 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 blah. Actually, here's a great example. Here's probably the best example of this in recent history. I'm excited I thought of this on the spot. So let's look at French and Spanish. or even, yeah, French, Spanish, and Mandarin for that matter. Every time I've learned, often, not every time, often when I've learned something new, it's someone, whether it's a teacher, a friend, someone introduced to me, hey, here's how this works. Here's this grammar point. Here's this word. Here's how it means. Let me give you 7, 8, 9, 10 examples. Now you try to make sentences with it. You try to tell me a story. Let's do an activity. And we basically, it's introduced to me. I'm given examples. I will then try to make up my own examples. I then get feedback based on the examples I came up with. Usually those 4 things give my brain a certain level of understanding of that concept. Mm-hmm. Now, once I've gotten that level though, I'm not able to use it automatically. I understand it, it's in my brain, I could think of it, but if I had to say it spontaneously, I could not. So what helps me get to a spontaneous level is looking at, is then watching videos, then communicating with native speakers, then doing blah, 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 blah. And that's generally worked well. Now, if we go to Gujarati for me, Gujarati is my mother tongue, right? But I'm studying it actively now because I never really grew up in India. I never studied it. I've never really spent a significant portion of my life in a Gujarati environment, blah, blah, blah. Now, Gujarati, although there's millions of speakers, there's very few resources for it. And it's incredibly hard to find any kind of grammar rules for it. So right. Even if you wanted to study from a textbook, you're going to have a hard time because there's just not many textbooks that are good and reliable that break it down and teach the grammar. It's just so difficult. Uh-huh. So in that respect, on the Gujarati side, usually at least for me, what I've had to do is essentially listen to people, talk to people, and to communicate, ask questions when something doesn't make sense. When I say something wrong, make a note of it. I then have to write it down, piece together what the heck is the pattern? Like, what is the pattern of why I have to say it like this versus like that? What's the pattern I'm missing? Once I get the pattern, AKA the grammar rule, I can then communicate it accurately moving forward. So like, I guess where I'm going with it is I'm just sharing my perspective of what I've always done for me personally. It's almost like there's a mixture of of using some things that are maybe considered more quote unquote traditional and then mixing it with other strategies that are more maybe less traditional, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know, man.
And to each their own. I mean, it's just an interesting conversation. It's literally what I love about language learning as a whole, because it's one of those things where everybody has their own experiences. Like the same way, like it's a great example. You're making me think of someone else I talked to who's like, man, TV shows with subtitles, that's where it's at. And I'm like, great. You're going TPRS, that's where it's at. I'm like, cool. Mm-hmm. I'm going, man, I like to do grammar stuff first to understand it, then go watch TV shows, talk to people, videos, etc., songs. It's interesting how everyone has their thing that works for them, you know?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It's fascinating.
I always like to look at children, right? Mm-hmm. Because, well, in my opinion, children, they're the best language learners, right? It's just the best because they can go anywhere and in the end they're going to be speaking as native people, right? So that's why I like TPRS so much, because it follows like this natural approach of listening first, no grammar rules.
Totally.
You know, in fact, the grammar is internalized by listening to the same story in different times.
Sure.
Right? And it's like you were talking about, you had to ask questions, right? To people who speak the language, your native language, right? You had to ask questions like, how does this work again, right? Well, that's basically one of the main things of TPRS, right? Like, make it easy to understand. right? Make it understandable for you, and then you just go ahead with the other parts of the process. Like TPRS uses a lot of questions, which makes your brain like answer automatically. Like during my lessons, I teach a story, and then I ask easy questions, like very easy questions to my students, so they can answer back, right? Um, it's just like the best answer could be just a yes or no, or a sí or no, right? And that would be like training your brain to answer automatically in Spanish.
And honestly, like I think like probably like that way of teaching is so effective.
Well,
Like
yeah.
I think that way of learning period is super, like using really anything that's based on comprehensible input is a good idea.
Yeah.
Like anything, I don't, as long as like, I find that's often like the connecting principle. Any kind of system or program that people use that works always has a tie to comprehensible, not always, but let's say has some tie to comprehensible input, in my perspective, in my experience anyway.
Yeah, definitely. It's like, I remember back in high school when we took English, because here in Colombia, we have to take English like most of our lives, right? From kindergarten until high school, you have to take English. And all we do, or at least all we did, I don't know how it is now, but all we did back then was in Spanish. You know, like the teacher went to the classroom, she was like, today we're going to see the verb to be, and started conjugation thing, these words, new vocabulary, just look up these new words in the dictionary, and that's it. That's not going to help you to do anything.
Totally.
Right?
Agreed. I agree with you. It's just not, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, definitely.
Totally. Anyway, how long has it been going on here? We've been going for, I don't know how long, but it's been a good chunk of time here. How long has it been? I'm not even sure. But at any rate, I think it's been almost 40 minutes, something like that. So, well, let's wrap this up. It was awesome having you on. Diego's information or website, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, as per usual, guys, in the description below. I had a lot of fun. That was a good conversation. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. I enjoyed it a lot too.
Sounds good. Well, let's wrap this up. Thanks for watching, guys. See you.
Bye.